adrenoleukodystrophy, ALD. Lorenzo has adrenoleukodystrophy, a neurological disorder, degenerative, destroys the white matter of the brain, all motor functions, relentless, progresses very quickly, death within 18 months, no cure. This is the story of an extraordinary person who happens still to be a child. I am his mother, Augusto Odone, his father. His name is Lorenzo Odone. I know that the story of Lorenzo will sound, at least at first, like the story coming from a typically doting mother. However, aside from his sheer physical vitality, which did strike everyone who met him, he was a very charming, a very thoughtful, a very devilish, and a very gifted, intellectually gifted child.
Lorenzo had a very good ear for music, and he could distinguish one singer from another. His preferred singer was Pavarotti. The neurologist told us that Lorenzo was affected by ALD, B, that there was no cure for ALD, and C, that Lorenzo would have lost all his functions over the next few months, and then that he would die.
Some 5 years later, he is very much alive, and so on his account are hundreds of other ALD-afflicted children around the world.
Barry was diagnosed when he was 7. It was a week after his 7th birthday, and he had just lost his sight. Straight after Christmas, he lost his walking, he lost his speech, and then everything else just followed suit, to the point that we got to Easter and he lost his ability to eat. So within 4 months, he'd lost everything. He still had his hearing, but absolutely, I mean, he's totally dependent on everything. So it was over a period of 6 months, all in all, from the day he was diagnosed, that he's in the situation he is now. We were just told that he's got this genetic illness. There was nothing they could do for him. And to just go home and look after him as best we could, which we weren't going to put up with. So we asked whether or not there was any research at all, anywhere. And they told us America, gave us a phone number, and we got in touch with Dr. Bill Rizzo, who invited us over, and it's gone on from there.
Good, very good. The disease itself manifests itself mainly in boys, and it usually has an onset around the time that these kids came down with it, that is between 5 and 10 years of age. It's a degenerative disease of the nervous system, the brain.
I was told that ALD was a genetic disease which only shows itself in boys and is passed from mothers to sons. When we came over December 87, Glenn was tested and unfortunately found to have the same genetic defect. They also said to me that he might develop the same symptoms as Barry.
We come to terms that Barry's got this terminal illness, and we didn't look like Glenn had it.
I just couldn't believe that this could happen to me with both the boys. I mean, we were both devastated, just totally devastated.
We're over here to find out how far the disease has progressed in Barry and how Glenn is at this precise time.
Okay, keep looking right at my finger. Right there.
They told me that it was an accumulation of long chains of fats in our blood, and they attack the brain, causing the brain damage.
Push against me. Push hard, hard, hard. Okay, good. Now this arm. Push, push, push. All that swimming pays off. At the time Lorenzo was diagnosed, there was no treatment for this disease, and there was nothing that was even on the horizon.
This was April 24th, 1984. We immediately asked for any journal articles that were available on adrenoleukodystrophy. And, of course, the young and rather self-conscious medical residents said, "Oh, don't trouble your little hearts about that. You wouldn't be able to read the words of the medical journal articles." And Augusto and I, being older and not illiterate parents, said we would jolly well plow through them. We had discovered that we were, by some act of God, on literally 5 minutes away from the National Library of Medicine.
Not being a scientist or a doctor, what I was after was any clue that would lead me to some kind of treatment or cure.
We resolved to get all the medical literature available, and we had, within 10 days, I think, obtained everything at the National Library of Medicine. We taught ourselves how to use the National Library computer and would take turns going to the library in every spare second and finding everything we could that was vaguely related to adrenoleukodystrophy. We hit every possible chapter heading. We knew nothing. We knew what the roots of the words were, and we went back to basic biology and basic chemistry, and we studied very hard. We studied as though Lorenzo's life depended on it.
And for me, it was like if I'd seen a snake around my boy. And I wanted to kill him.
We were doing some research in the laboratory on trying to alter the fatty acid levels that are accumulated in this disease and are felt responsible for the symptoms. And Mr. Odone must have read some of our research papers and gave me a call. At the time, we were looking at ways to alter levels of the C26 fatty acids that accumulate in this disease using cultured skin cells in the laboratory. And we screened a number of different fatty acids, one of which was oleic acid, and we found that they had a beneficial effect in lowering levels of the offending fatty acids in the fibroblasts, the skin cells. At the time, these studies were very experimental and were being done in the laboratory and hadn't been applied to humans at all.
By the third week of November 1984, Lorenzo was unable to walk, and by the end of November, he was unable to speak. His speech had deteriorated to the extent where I could no longer even pretend that I understood the sounds. And that was the period I've described as the descent into hell. To have a brilliant, articulate, trilingual child making sounds that not even Mummy could understand was more anguishing than anyone can possibly imagine.
And what we did was to ask Dr. Rizzo whether we could start giving oleic acid to Lorenzo. And to that, Dr. Rizzo answered that, well, he did not have oleic acid in an edible form.
The very next morning, I went down to the local library in Chevy Chase, went to the standard American business directory, made a list of all the companies in this country manufacturing oils of any type, and began systematically ringing them up to see if they had oleic acid. There were probably 40 or 45 companies that I called. On the first round, only one company would even talk to me. And then I began ringing back all the companies who hadn't returned the call. A very kind researcher called Dr. Russell McIntyre said, "I have a pint of pure oleic acid on my laboratory shelf. Would you like it? My younger sister Deirdre, who had also been tested to be a carrier of the disorder, volunteered, insisted that she wanted to be the one to try it out first. And Augusto, who is a marvelous cook, took over catering for his sister-in-law.
I had a blood test before I started the diet, and then at the end of it, and the levels dropped dramatically. And no one expected that, I don't think, the dramatic decrease. It was pretty amazing, I guess.
Lenny's 7 now, which is the time that Barry was really struck down. So I'm constantly on the lookout for things going wrong. Although he's given me no calls to have anything like that go wrong, but you're just constantly looking. It's a constant fear because you've had it done to you once. So who's to say you're not going to have it done to you again?
Ready, steady, go.
He doesn't understand the technical terms, he doesn't understand any of that, but he understands what's going on. I mean, he's seen his brother, and he sometimes gets very upset about it.
This time I've done a belly flop again.
Well, when Glenn went in for his swimming competitions and he got those medals, well, I was just ready to burst. Everybody's watching him swim and thinking, oh, he's done great, but we were thinking he's done great, and he's done it, and at the back of our minds we're thinking, there can't be anything wrong with him. If he can swim as well as he is, his coordination must be wonderful, so therefore nothing's going wrong. So it's a twofold thing with him. Anything he does always carries that he's okay, he's doing what everybody else is doing, and he's doing it really well. So it's just great to see him do it, because Barry never did it.
When we saw that it had been 60% successful in Lorenzo, we were absolutely elated. But the 60% of Lorenzo's levels was far from being satisfactory. And so we continued with, however, great hope now that we were on the right path. Lorenzo's condition, of course, required my staying with him every second of the day, and Augusto went on at an even more feverish pace.
And I also thought that if I would understand why oleic acid had worked, albeit partially, then perhaps I would have found a way to completely normalize the very long-chain fatty acid in Lorenzo. My brains were concentrating very, very much because the time was running out. We had to get there sooner rather than later. Then one April night, I had an idea.
We got this call from Augusto Odone in back end of 1985, I guess. And what he wanted us to make was an oil which he figured out could be made from rapeseed oil. tried in the States, and nobody would do anything for him. The Odones came to Croda Universal here in Hull because they had heard that we were experts in the field of handling erucic acid, which is derived from rapeseed oil. When we started work on producing this oil, we did not know what it was going to be used for. We asked Don Suddaby, who works in the laboratory here, to do the work on isolating this particular oil. He got very engrossed in it and started to work all night and spent about 6 months, in fact, creating the first small amount of the oil that was required. When we found out that Mr. Odone had actually reasoned out this theory for himself, and when we also found out that he was not scientifically trained, we were amazed, because it was an extremely brilliant piece of work. What Augusto Odone had worked out was the way in which these fatty acids build up in ALD patients. If we use these children's building blocks to represent the fatty acids, they build up from fairly small units and eventually end up as very big units. And it is these very long chains which cause the problem in ALD. Now, build-up of fatty acids happens in everybody, but in normal human beings, normal people, these long-chain fatty acids actually get burnt away. In ALD, this can't happen, and what eventually happens is that the long-chain fatty acids accumulate in the body. Now, the same system applies for unsaturated fatty acids, so that we get the molecule being built up in exactly the same way. The difference between the unsaturated fatty acids and the saturated fatty acids is that these materials are harmless. What Augusto already knew was that if you fed more oleic acid into this pathway, the buildup of these very long-chain fats just didn't occur. What he didn't know was why. Then he had this stroke of genius. What he reasoned out was that the enzyme which was responsible for making these saturated fats bigger was the same enzyme which was responsible for making these unsaturated fats bigger. And by feeding in more oleic acid at the front end, the enzyme was getting swamped or diverted, and the buildup just didn't occur. The real stroke of brilliance came much later on, when he reasoned that if he could interfere with the enzymes further down the chain, then the treatment should be more effective. Augusto realized at this point that he could further overload the enzyme system by introducing fatty acids, unsaturated fatty acids, at these positions. And this is what he asked us to make, because he knew that you could get both of these fatty acids from rapeseed oil. And we produced this particular oil, which was the work that Don Suddaby did in our laboratories here. Shortly after we'd sent the first amount of oil to America, Augusto Odone gave us a call saying that he'd administered the oil to both his sister-in-law and his son Lorenzo, and that within a very short period of time, the long-chain fatty acids in the blood had fallen to normal. And we were frankly quite amazed, because it had never happened before in the history of ALD.
We were lucky that soon after Barry was diagnosed, we heard about Lorenzo's oil. Both the boys were put on the trial, and Glenn was the first boy in the world to get the oil before any brain damage had started. Now, although we know it's too late for Barry, we feel the oil is working, and that the brain scans will hopefully give Glenn the all clear.
So this scan here shows Barry's MRI study at this time, and you can see the back of the brain, which controls vision and is very important in that regard. It has a lot of white abnormalities showing up here, indicating demyelination. In contrast, Glenn has a completely normal pattern, entirely normal. No involvement whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's great.
As far as Glenn is concerned, we feel that because of this treatment, the illness will never develop in him, hopefully. And really, as far as the Odones are concerned, we can't say how thankful we are to them. Now we're in Virginia, we've finally got to meet them. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. That's lovely. Well, thanks ever so much for everything you've done. And you, Augusto, about the oil. Because without that, Glenn wouldn't be the way he is now, so just thanks.
Bye, Christina.
Yeah,
All the
bye-bye.
best
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, bye.
I'm very glad about Glenn, but now the next step is to restore health to Barry and Lorenzo.
Yeah. Okay
Bye.
then.
I think the Lorenzo's oil is the most promising advance in the treatment of this disease that we've seen to date, such that even Dr. Hugo Mosier, who's the leading expert on this disease, recently announced in a meeting in Rome that the trial of this dietary oil will be expanded to all patients with adrenoleukodystrophy.
Therapy. Dr. Rizzo and I want to acknowledge with gratitude and admiration the role that Mr. Odone had in the intellectual creation of the erucic acid story, of Lorenzo's oil. And I think if I know him, he will have some comments to make later on.
Cari amici,
Dear friends, very dear compatriots of Augusto and Lorenzo, 2 years ago, in the middle of an ordinary night spent in vigil over my child, the telephone began to ring.
Emanuele, come Lorenzo,
Like Lorenzo, of whom all Italy is talking, my Emmanuel has ALD, and I want Lorenzo's oil.
tutti volevate l'olio,
All of you wanted Lorenzo's oil, and you wanted it immediately.
l'olio di Lorenzo
You got the oil immediately,
l'avete avuto subito.
and an American sister to boot. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the support you've given, and are still giving to Augusto. You are the most splendid parents in the world.
Siete i genitori più splendidi del mondo.
Lorenzo's oil is only the first chapter of the story. We have now to repair the damage produced by the disease. ALD, what it does, it destroys the myelin sheet surrounding the nerve in the brains of the kids. The next step for us now is to restore the myelin sheet. It is for this reason that together with other family, we have launched an international project, the Myelin Project. The objective of this project is to force the pace of research on reconstitution of the myelin. I want to apply the same technique that I've done for Lorenzo's oil. I want to bring together all the researchers. I want that they cooperate instead of competing with each other. You know, on the administrative side.